Good morning, I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, not backing down. Moscow's promises of de-escalation in Ukraine have, it seems, already been broken. As shellings continue across the country, officials say a school and oil depot in the besieged nation's eastern region have been set on fire by Russian munitions. And forces surrounding the capital of Kyiv are reportedly holding their positions despite a limited withdrawal. Meanwhile, President Biden, in a call with Ukraine's President Zelensky, pledged an additional $500 million in aid. Comes as Zelensky warns his nation of a renewed threat from Russia targeting the eastern Donbas region. We've got team coverage this morning from Washington to Kharkiv. Plus, bringing a little piece of home to the children of war. Also this morning, yes, men in Vladimir Putin being misled by his own top advisors on Ukraine, Russia's economy, and beyond. U.S. officials seem to think so. We're going to dig into new intelligence that puts Putin at odds with his senior military brass. Bracing for impact, millions of Americans are waking up this morning to the looming threat of severe weather. Monstrous storm system is barreling across the South and Midwest, heading toward the Atlantic coast. Blistering winds, pelting rain, leaving hundreds of thousands without power as the sun rises. Our Bill Cairns has the front's latest path. And pressing pause. He's one of America's most recognizable actors of the modern era, someone who's captivated audiences in big screen blockbusters and direct-to-DVD projects alike. Now Bruce Willis is taking a step back from his decades-long acting career to focus on his health. We're going to have more on his condition later in this hour. Heartfelt message from his family posted yesterday that's getting a lot of response from people.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of questions about that health condition. So we'll dive into that, too.
We're going to have a doctor with us to answer some of those questions. We begin this hour in Ukraine, where there are fresh attempts to get people out of the devastated city of Mariupol.
Yeah, those humanitarian efforts are taking on even greater urgency this morning after President Zelensky warned that Russia could launch a new wave of attacks on the eastern part of the country as it refocuses on the Donbas region. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel is in the east and reports from the city of Kharkiv.
Savannah, Joe, U.S. and now British intelligence officials say that Russian generals may not be giving Vladimir Putin an accurate picture of what's happening here in Ukraine. As overnight, Ukraine's President Zelensky says that Russia is planning a new offensive out here in the east, far from scaling back its attacks as Russia promised, but that Ukrainian forces are ready for it.
On the outskirts of Kharkiv, we followed Ukrainian troops to see what U.S. and British intelligence say Russian generals are too afraid to show their president. That the Russian military is losing ground and taking heavy losses.
This was a Russian camp, and you can see they had all of their weapons here, dugout positions, and they were bombed. There's still some bodies in this area, and they left a lot of their equipment behind after what appears to have been a devastating attack on their position. There's nothing left.
It seems these Russian troops never knew what hit them. Their uniforms were scattered everywhere, along with weapons and ammunition. Ukrainian soldiers helped themselves. Knocking out this position allowed Ukrainian forces to advance and take back the nearby village of Malorohan, where the Babkov family was enjoying their new freedom on the first day after Russian soldiers were kicked out. The bombings were horrible. The airstrikes were the worst, says Nadia. They took us to see where they'd been hiding. No electricity or lights.
All right, I have a flashlight on my phone. Let's see if we can.
They lived down in this tiny cellar for 27 days next to potatoes and pickles.
Do you think the worst is over?
I hope our soldiers tame this beast. The Russian president is deranged, says Leonid. Leonid's granddaughter, Alisa, spent her time drawing on the walls, images of happier times. It was my therapy to keep calm, she says. Wise words from a girl who just turned 8. Now she's drawing with her chalk outside. Down the road, 88-year-old Praskovia was sitting by herself, disoriented and frightened. I'm so afraid. My whole body is shaking, she says. At night, I cover myself in a blanket and I shake. Mostly, she wanted comfort. Praskovia lived through World War II and says she doesn't have the strength to go through it all again.
Praskovia was overwhelmed by all that she's been through. She's also extremely lonely. She was all alone in that house. She hasn't been in touch with her son or grandson for a long time. She said she misses them deeply, so I became something of a stand-in for them. She, like many Ukrainians, is in a state of shock. But she does seem to be doing a little bit better now, and she has received some humanitarian aid, including food. Savannah, Joe?
Oh, so heartbreaking. Richard Engel, thank you so much.
As Richard mentioned, the White House says new intelligence suggests that Putin is being misinformed by his own advisors about the war in Ukraine, as well as the economic impact of those crippling sanctions on the Russian economy. NBC's chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander joins us now. And Peter, the White House could also be taking aim at those high gas prices.
Yeah, that's right, Joe. On average, Americans right now are paying $4.22 per gallon for gas. You don't need me to remind you of that. $1.35 more than it was just a year ago, which is why President Biden is expected to roll out a new effort today to combat those rising prices. And as Russia's military losses mount on the ground there in Ukraine, U.S. officials are sharing declassified intelligence, first reported by NBC News, about how Vladimir Putin's own advisors are shielding him from how badly the invasion is actually going. This morning, President Biden looking to limit the impact of the war in Ukraine on Americans. A source familiar with the matter telling NBC News the White House is considering releasing 1 million barrels of oil a day from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve for up to 6 months, hoping to ease the spike in gas prices now hitting Americans. An announcement could come as early as today. And on the intelligence front, the question this morning, is Vladimir Putin being kept in the dark by his own advisors? U.S. officials say so, one telling NBC News Putin's senior advisors are too afraid to tell him the truth.
We believe that Putin is being misinformed by his advisors about how badly the Russian military is performing.
With the White House saying the intelligence underscores what it calls Russia's strategic blunder. The U.S. also believes Putin is being misled about how the Russian economy is being crippled by sanctions. The Secretary of State offering this assessment.
One of the Achilles heels of autocracies is that you don't have people in those systems who speak truth to power or who have the ability to speak truth to power.
With estimates that as many as 15,000 Russian troops have been killed and reports of low morale among those still in Ukraine, U.S. officials say they have information that Putin felt misled by the Russian military. Adding there is now persistent tension between Putin and senior Russian military officials stemming from Putin's mistrust in their leadership. The Pentagon warning it could lead to a potential escalation by Russia.
When he actually begins to realize how badly his military is doing in Ukraine, you don't know what kind of reaction that's going to cause in him.
Also on Tuesday, President Biden spending more than an hour on the phone with President Zelensky, receiving an update on Ukraine's peace talks with Russia and announcing the U.S.'s plan to provide Ukraine with $500 million in direct aid. As for that new intelligence, by sharing its findings, the U.S. hopes it may undermine Russia's strategy. It is the latest salvo in an information war between Washington and Moscow. And about the war on the ground, during their call yesterday, President Biden and President Zelensky also discussed the U.S. and its allies' continued efforts to identify additional capabilities to help the Ukrainian military defend its country. Joe and Savannah.
Peter, thanks so much. Let's get more on the situation in Ukraine with Michael O'Hanlon. He's a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. Michael, good to have you with us. Let's start off with those reports from the White House about President Putin being misled by his advisors. I want to play some sound from the UK's cybersecurity chief, who appears to be echoing those claims.
It increasingly looks like Putin has massively misjudged the situation. We've seen Russian soldiers, short of weapons and morale, refusing to carry out orders, sabotaging their own equipment, and even accidentally shooting down their own aircraft. And even though we believe Putin's advisors are afraid to tell him the truth, what's going on and the extent of these misjudgments must be crystal clear to the regime.
So, Michael, what do you make of these allegations by the U.S. and the U.K., and what's the impact of this kind of misinformation to Putin?
Hi, Joe and Savannah. You know, I take this with a little bit of a grain of salt. It is striking. that the information flow seems to be compromised. You would think that they would at least want to share information that required a change in strategy to make their own prospects for mitigated or partial success better. I'm not sure Putin's really in the dark. He realizes the war is still going on. He realizes he hasn't found Zelensky. He knows that he doesn't control Kiev or other major cities for the most part. I don't know that information flow could really be so compromised as to deny him that. I don't think he's living in a complete artificial make-believe land. But I do believe the possibility that the actual casualty figures, the attrition levels, the specifics on losing some territory that had previously been gained, some of that kind of information may in fact be reaching him imperfectly, perhaps because of the fear of his advisors, as your report so noted.
Absolutely. Now, Michael, we've heard Russia announce it was scaling back its military operations in and around the capital of Kyiv, saying then it was going to focus on the eastern Donbas region. Now, on its face, any type of de-escalation, could sound good, but I mean, this is not good news for the eastern part of the country that has already taken such hard hits. They're bracing now for these new attacks. According to President Zelensky, do you think we're entering a new phase in this war now? I mean, how do you see this Russian focus on the east playing out, and what's your greatest concerns?
Well, Savannah, I guess I share your skepticism. I think it's always possible that Putin's looking to fool people and then try again at Kyiv, or either regroup his forces or try some different tactics, some kind of a special forces raid to try to get Zelensky if they think they can pinpoint his location, maybe try to cripple the regime or topple it from the top. I'm not sure that would work, but they may be trying something or thinking something like that. But also my guess is that if they have fallen back on a more modest strategy, it's not going to be just to take Donbas. It's going to be to try to establish a land bridge all the way from Russia through Donbas, through that city of Mariupol that's, of course, been so tragically hit, and then all the way over to Crimea, which means they need more time to fight. And they probably can concentrate enough force in that region to at least think they have a chance of establishing that land corridor. So even though I do think there's a possibility of the peace talks succeeding, my guess is it may not be for a little while, and Russia may want to be in a position to just sort of sit on a land corridor that connects all the way over to Crimea before it's really willing to stand down.
Yeah, I mean, Michael, let's talk more about the diplomatic effort. I mean, there appears to be some positive signals, a little progress coming out of the peace talks on Tuesday. We understand they're going to continue online tomorrow. Do you think, I guess two questions here, would Russia accept Ukraine's proposal to stay neutral with its security guaranteed by NATO countries like the U.S. and Britain? And on the flip side, do you think Ukraine would compromise on its territory in any way in areas like Donbas and Crimea?
On the first question, I'm not sure we're going to give true guarantees. I mean, that's sort of been what the war is about, the idea that someday Ukraine might be in NATO. We never quite decided we wanted them in NATO. We said someday they maybe will be, or someday they will be, but we didn't really have a schedule or an interim security guarantee. So in a way, we'd be now promising something that we weren't previously willing to promise under President Bush, President Obama, or President Trump, or for that matter, Biden himself in his first year in office. So I think that's a stretch to think that we would come to Ukraine's military defense with our own American armed forces. So President Zelensky understandably would like that. I don't think he's going to get that. I think he's going to have to settle for more modest steps to promote his security. For example, we could have a large UN peacekeeping mission deployed, and maybe Putin could tolerate that. Even if he doesn't like it, he could maybe tolerate that. What he's not going to tolerate is any kind of military alliance or quasi-alliance with the very Western world that he was so adamantly opposed to Ukraine joining before this war began. On the territorial issue, I think that's going to be maybe the hardest piece, because I really can't see Zelensky conceding cities that he's and his forces have been fighting so hard to try to retain at such horrible loss. So I think that might be the hardest nut to crack. You might need some kind of guaranteed access or some kind of international supervision, but not really giving all that land to Russia.
All right, Michael O'Hanlon, really, really fascinating analysis there. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Now, the United Nations is now saying more than 2 million children have fled Ukraine and are in urgent need of an education, of safety, of support. Well, now there's a new grassroots efforts aimed at doing just that by sending books from Ukraine to those children in need. NBC News correspondent Jacob Soboroff is with us now from Lviv with more. Hey, Jacob, good morning.
Hey, Savannah, good morning to you. The owner of this bookstore wants people around the world to give Ukrainian refugees and their children what she calls a piece of home during this horrific war. And she wants to do that by sending books from these shelves to shelters. Russian missiles striking Lviv Saturday. Down below our vantage point here, that's a fuel depot. A city shaken. But this week, life continued, including for Mariana Savka, back at work as editor-in-chief of one of the Ukraine's largest publishers. So these are the books that you publish?
Yes.
Back at work, but not back to normal. What's it been like for you to have to close some of your stores around the country?
I'm not happy that they closed, but I know that it can be dangerous for our employees.
Now, Mariana and her colleagues have started collecting humanitarian aid. This van filled with essentials bound for Kharkiv. But it's literature she feels can help heal the most, which is why she and her publishing house, Old Lion, launched a fundraising effort. And people are donating.
Yes.
What they receive pays to send books to refugees in surrounding countries, like these kids in Poland, nearly 500 so far. If there's one book
yes.
that you'd like the children of Ukraine to have the most as they're abroad as refugees, which one is it?
Not here, not here. Yes, I know where is this book in my cabinet. Here's this book.
It's called How War Changed Rondo. Originally published after Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014. As Russia attacks again, relevant as ever. This is what the news looks like now.
Yes, absolutely.
It says here, the war touched everyone. The book's story about kids living in a fictional place at war called Rondo.
I tried together to make a light.
Now real life for Ukrainian children. Together, we read the book's final passage, one she wishes can spread hope. The whole town sang until every black flower had disappeared and the darkness had dissolved completely.
Victory.
Victory.
Yes.
And that's what you hope for Ukraine?
Yes.
Mariana and Old Lion aren't just sending the old school hardcover copies of books to refugees living abroad. They've also made 30 different ebooks available, and they have been downloaded, get this, 40,000 times since the beginning of the war. If anybody watching us, streaming us right now, wants to get involved, donate so that these books can get out to more refugees, head over to the Today Show's website, today.com. Back to you guys.
Absolutely. Great to hear how we can help. Jacob Sobroff, thank you so much.
We turn now to a destructive storm system that pounded the South overnight. Several tornadoes touched down. There was a lot of wind damage as a strong line of storms is now heading east. NBC's Blaine Alexander joins us from Tallulah, Louisiana with the latest. Blaine, good morning.
Well, Joe, good morning to you. You know, typically this building right here behind me would have been full of students at the time that the storms blew through. Fortunately, they, ahead of the storms, canceled classes, and it's a good thing they did. This is where the roof used to be. Right over here is where the roof ended up, and we're seeing pictures like this kind of dotting cities throughout the South in the storm's path as millions more brace for impact.
This morning, in the weather-worn South, another round of severe storms. Overnight, torrential rain soaked New Orleans' famous Bourbon Street, prompting flash flood warnings and sending tourists scrambling for cover. While powerful winds toppled trees around Louisiana, leaving crews rushing to clear the roadways. A similar scene in Mississippi after a supercell thunderstorm hit Hattiesburg overnight. And in neighboring Alabama, the National Weather Service there warned of a large and extremely dangerous tornado as heavy rains flooded streets from city to city. Across the South, more than 100,000 people left without power. Now the storm continues its charge to the east, with nearly 57 million Americans still under the risk of severe weather from Florida to New York. The impact has been felt throughout the week. Earlier Wednesday in Jackson, Mississippi, tornado sirens sounding off as funnel clouds formed in the sky.
That's it. That's a funnel.
Just miles away, uprooted trees crashing into homes.
The tree fell in my house, messed my washroom up. My house is flooding.
In some areas, wind speeds reached 80 miles per hour. In Tallulah, Louisiana, this local high school caught the brunt of the storm, leaving classrooms crushed.
We wrecked.
While in Arkansas, a confirmed EF3 tornado near Springdale left a path of destruction, tearing down cell towers, ripping rooftops.
I had no idea it'd be this bad. I couldn't even get out my front door.
Officials there say at least 7 people were injured, 2 critically. One local elementary school releasing these photos of a damaged building. Classes are expected to resume today.
And today, the National Weather Service is going to fan out across at least 5 states here in the South, Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, looking at the damage and trying to determine what exactly happened when those storms blew through. Joe.
All right, Blaine, thank you so much. So what's next? Let's get a check on your Morning News Now weather.
Bill Cairns is back with the latest. Hey, Bill.
Yeah, so we're still watching these storms, guys, moving through areas of Florida and southern Georgia. We still have a tornado watch, or at least a potential of isolated tornadoes, until 2 o'clock. And this does include areas from Tallahassee to Vidalia, Georgia. And eventually this will sweep towards the I-95 corridor from Jacksonville up to areas through South Carolina. Watch out Savannah, Charleston, and even Wilmington. But there's the storms now. We did have a couple tornadoes reported just north of Panama City in the early morning hours, but we haven't had any new tornado reports in the last 2 to 3 hours. So today, the area of concern shifts to the East Coast and isolated tornadoes. We're not going to see 24 like we did yesterday. We may have a handful, maybe, 4 or 5 or 6 or so. And we don't think there's really the chance for any big significant tornadoes, but even a little one can do significant damage. Wind damage, though, could be the most popular most popular severe weather report during the day today. And that could go anywhere in the yellow, so 57 million people. So let me kind of give you the timing on all of this mess. As we go throughout the morning, we're going to watch all of these storms over areas of Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. This is paused at 2 p.m. So the storm's right over the top of Columbia, approaching Savannah, approaching Jacksonville, and almost over the top of Raleigh. Then as we head to the north, it looks like the worst of these storms around 7 p.m. or so, approaching Washington, D.C. There could be 2 broken lines. If you're anywhere from D.C., Philly to New York, Hartford to Boston, just keep in mind anywhere between about 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. is when some of these strong storms could come on through. So the rest of today, areas that got hit hard yesterday with all the damage, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas. Today's a decent day. It's a little breezy, but at least it's dry for any cleanup efforts. In the weekend forecast, thankfully, we're not going to see a repeat of any severe weather. It's actually a pretty quiet start to April. Just some snow showers and rain showers off the Great Lakes. A little bit of rain in Florida on your Friday. Saturday, still kind of brisk and chilly in the Great Lakes, but the middle of the country warms up nicely. 90 in San Antonio on Saturday. And by the time we get to Sunday, still a little cooler than we'd like the Northeast and Great Lakes, but no real significant weather that'll cause you to change your plans or have you doing cleanup after severe thunderstorms. So pretty nice start to April.
A little reprieve. We'll take it.
There you go. Yeah.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah. And coming up on Morning News Now, our continuing coverage of the war in Ukraine off the battlefields.
We'll bring you the plight of one of the nation's most vulnerable populations trying to escape the violence and make it out alive, the elderly. That's after the break.
Former President Donald Trump is under fire over comments made in a recent interview where he called on Russian President Vladimir Putin to release potentially harmful information about President Biden and his son. It's not the first time Trump has called on Putin for something like this. NBC News correspondent Garrett Haake has this story.
Former President Trump facing bipartisan backlash to these new comments asking President Putin for dirt on the Bidens.
Why did the mayor of Moscow's wife give the Bidens, both of them, $3.5 million? So now I would think Putin would know the answer to that. I think he should release it.
Mr. Trump referencing findings from a 2020 report by Senate Republicans into Hunter Biden's business dealings in Ukraine. Lawyers for President Biden's son say there was no payment. Mr. Trump's new request echoes similar asks in 2016 about Hillary Clinton.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing.
And the 2019 phone call with Ukraine's President Zelensky, also asking for damaging information on the Bidens that resulted in his first impeachment.
At least he's consistently immoral and unpatriotic to be appealing to Putin at a time when Russia is killing Ukrainians once again for dirt on his opponents.
Some Republicans condemning the request.
I don't think we should be asking Putin to do anything.
He's one of the worst people on the planet, and America shouldn't be asking for favors.
Hunter Biden knew exactly.
While others point to an ongoing federal criminal investigation into possible tax fraud and money laundering by Hunter Biden, who has denied any wrongdoing.
He could talk about what he wants to talk about. I am interested to hear what happens with Hunter Biden, though, and the federal investigation into him, and I imagine that we'll be learning more about that.
That was Garrett Haake reporting there for us. Thanks, Garrett.
More than 4 million Ukrainians have fled the country since the start of Russia's invasion. On top of that, many elderly Ukrainians would like to leave, but they've had to stay behind. Now there's an international rescue effort focused on Ukraine's most vulnerable population. Here's NBC News national correspondent Gabe Gutierrez.
For refugees of all ages, the journey is grueling. But for older Ukrainians, it can be nearly impossible.
I guess the government doesn't have time for this think about old people.
Daniel Koretnik grew up south of Kyiv, but had been living in Portugal before the war. Now he's back to coordinate rescue efforts for older refugees. His network of volunteers fanning out across hard-hit areas.
We try to take people from dangerous places.
There's a web of organizations racing to evacuate the elderly. According to Help Age International, Ukraine has the largest percentage of older people affected by conflict in the world. 1 in 4 people here is over 60 years old. Most of them don't want to be evacuated from their homes, yet 91% need help to get food because of mobility issues. Julia Enton, a paralegal in Los Angeles, is among those trying to get them out.
This is their home. And now at the later stages of their life, they have to be torn away from everything that they knew.
It can almost be too much to bear. We met Valentina after her agonizing escape from Mariupol. The grandmother sobbed as she described her 15-mile trek on foot to a humanitarian bus. We were bombarded ruthlessly, she says. One word can describe the situation: hell. But she calls her 8-year-old granddaughter a hero for helping her. An awful journey that she says would have been impossible to survive alone. And now news that would make it easier for immigrants, including those fleeing Ukraine, to come to the U.S. In late May, the Biden administration now says that it plans to lift Title 42, the public health policy that denied asylum seekers entry due to COVID. Officials at the border are now anticipating a surge when the policy lifts. Back to you.
Gabe Gutierrez, thank you. Let's take a look at what else is making news around the world this morning.
Claudio Labanga is back with us this hour. Hey, Claudio, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Well, 2 UK judges will no longer sit in the Supreme Court in Hong Kong. They say that their role has become untenable since the introduction in 2020 of a new national security law that makes it easier to arrest protesters in Hong Kong and target freedom of speech. The senior British judges have sat on the court since 1997 as part of an agreement when Hong Kong was handed over to China by the UK. And let's move to the UK, where an inquiry concluded that more than 200 babies died over 2 decades in a British hospital due to persistent failure in its maternity care. The review began in 2018 after 2 families who lost their babies campaigned for an inquiry. It concluded that their death would have and could have prevented with better care and criticized management for failing to investigate. And let's stick to Britain, where the ripple effect of soaring gas prices due to the war in Ukraine is being felt in the food chain. The rising cost of heating glass houses means there's a shortage of vegetables like cucumbers, peppers, aubergines, tomatoes, you name it. And their prices, as a consequence, has skyrocketed, guys.
Right, being felt in so many different ways. Claudio, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up on this hour of Morning News Now, pressing pause. Famed actor Bruce Willis is now taking a step back from his decades-long career on the silver screen after he's diagnosed with aphasia. We're going to dig a little deeper into that condition.
Plus, comedian Chris Rock's first public appearance since that incident at the Oscars over the weekend. Will bring you what he had to say about the slap seen around the world after this.
There's a lot of reaction this morning to the news about actor Bruce Willis's health. His family announced yesterday that he has a medical condition known as aphasia that impacts his cognitive abilities, including speech, reading, and writing. He's now retiring from acting, a career that spans more than 4 decades. Willis has been a household name since the 1980s and has been one of the industry's most bankable stars at the box office.
Known for his tough-talking on-screen persona and that iconic catchphrase, Bruce Willis is now stepping away from the spotlight. His family writes that he has recently been diagnosed with aphasia, which is impacting his cognitive abilities. As a result of this, and with much consideration, Bruce is stepping away from the career that has meant so much to him, adding, as Bruce always says, live it up. And together, we plan to do just that. Willis got his break in the 80s on the small screen.
Just remember, you're dressed like that for America. And I, for one, salute you.
Salute you, Addison.
Starring alongside Sybil Shepherd in the primetime hit Moonlighting, earning an Emmy and Golden Globe. At the time, he opened up about his newfound fame in an interview here on Today.
I never really got into this business seeking fame and fortune. If anything, it makes me want to keep my private life more private.
Willis later cemented his action star status as Detective John McClane in Die Hard, a role he'd reprise 4 more times.
Welcome to the party, pal!
The beloved actor has found success in a wide range of films, from Pulp Fiction to Sixth Sense and Armageddon.
If we don't get this job done, everybody's gone.
Willis has 5 daughters, 2 with current wife Emma Hemming and 3 with ex Demi Moore. The former It couple has remained close even after their divorce, with Moore even surprising Willis at his Comedy Central roast a few years ago.
I just look at our marriage like the Sixth Sense. You were dead the whole time. And no matter what, you will always be family. You've been a great friend, a great father, and easily one of my top 3 husbands.
Earlier this month, Moore shared a photo with Willis as he celebrated his 67th birthday, writing, "Thankful for our blended family."
You know, while Hollywood is mourning the loss of this actor on screen, that he has this support system behind the scenes to really tackle this challenging time together as a family.
M. Night Shyamalan, who directed Willis in The Sixth Sense, tweeted, "All my love and respect to my big brother, Bruce Willis. I know his wonderful family is surrounding him with support and strength. He will always be that hero on that poster on my wall as a kid." According to the LA Times, some people who worked with Willis on recent films have noted that the actor has shown signs of cognitive decline on sets, and they've expressed concern with his well-being. The LA Times quoted several sources as saying that Willis struggled to remember his dialogue, was even fed lines through an earpiece at one point.
For more on this, let's bring in Dr. Aditi Nerurkar. She's a physician at Harvard Medical School. Doctor, always great to have you with us. So let's talk through this. I know a lot of people have questions, and this came out. I mean, Bruce Willis was in a few movies last year. He's got more coming out this year, so it feels very sudden. And then on top of that, this aphasia is not a very well-known condition. So first, explain to us what can cause this.
There are many causes to aphasia, Savannah. Strokes, brain tumors, infection, injury, and dementia are all common causes. The underlying mechanism in all is a damage to the brain areas responsible for language processing, both in understanding speech and constructing speech.
And so what are some of the first symptoms of this? And is there anyone that someone should watch out for? Is this something that you kind of, given what you just said, think you could potentially get after some kind of injury?
So, Savannah, often what we see is that the first symptoms are noticed by close associates or family rather than the patient. And there are 3 broad categories. The first is a verbose patient, long, rambling sentences, nonsensical words, and a misuse of words. The second, on the other end of the spectrum, are terse patients, short phrases, the inability to construct a sentence, and missed words. And the third is a complete loss of speech. In all 3, the understanding of speech may or may not be preserved.
And Dr. Nerurkar, what kind of treatments are out there for people with this?
The treatment, Savannah, really depend on the underlying cause of the aphasia and the extent of brain involvement. Often the mainstay of therapy for aphasia is speech therapy. But, you know, the challenging thing with aphasia is depending on the cause, it can be reversible and temporary in some, but permanent in others. It is a medical and neurological condition, but with a deep psychological impact for the patient and their families.
All right, Dr. Aditi Nerurkar, lots of questions answered there that I know people are wondering about this morning. Thank you so much.
Overnight, Chris Rock made his first public remarks about being slapped by Will Smith at the Oscars, attempting to deflect the incident with, as you might expect, a little humor.
Yeah, the comedian briefly talked about it last night at 2 shows in Boston. Today, news anchor Chanel Jones has more on what he had to say.
Hey, Chris, you ready for tonight, Chris?
Overnight, Chris Rock returning to the stage. Oh, wow! For the first time since Will Smith slapped him at the Oscars, Rock keeping his sense of humor.
How was your weekend?
In audio obtained by Variety, Rock briefly talked with the sold-out crowd last night.
I'm still kind of processing what happened.
Saying he wasn't really ready to talk about the incident.
So, at some point, I'll talk about that. And, it'll be serious, it'll be fun.
Rock's show was briefly interrupted by someone in the crowd, but overall, the crowd rallied around Rock, starting with a long standing ovation, which Rock said made him misty-eyed. And Rock's fellow comedians are rallying around him, too. Rock's stand-up set coming just hours after the Motion Picture Academy announced they've started disciplinary proceedings against Smith. On the Ellen DeGeneres show, Oscar co-host Wanda Sykes questioning why Smith wasn't removed from the ceremony.
And for them to let him stay in that room and enjoy the rest of the show and accept his award, I was like, how gross is this? This is just the wrong message.
The Academy says Smith was asked to leave the ceremony and refused. Comedians David Spade and Dana Carvey speaking out on a podcast, saying watching the incident was triggering for them, reminding them of childhood bullying, and condemned how Rock was seemingly left alone to handle the situation.
It must have been tough for Chris to sit in the back and realize literally nothing happened. No one walked up, no security, no stop the show, no. It was just like, on with the show, this is it.
Amy Schumer, who also co-hosted the show, weighing in too, writing in part in a since-deleted Instagram post, she is still triggered and traumatized. I love my friend Chris Rock and believe he handled it like a pro. The whole thing was so disturbing. Others now worried the incident could impact future performances.
It sets a terrible precedent for comedy clubs.
Yes.
Like, are people going to decide that they're going to go on stage and smack the comedian now?
In Boston, fans at Rock's show last night praising how he dealt with the incredibly difficult situation.
So ridiculously wrong. I was proud of the way he handled it.
Now, Will Smith did apologize to Chris Rock in a social media post, and the Academy of Motion Pictures and Sciences also apologized to Chris Rock, thanking him for, quote, his resilience in that moment. And now Rock has 4 more shows in Boston this week, so we will be listening if he says anything else about that incident. And coming up on Morning News Now, gearing up for a different kind of conflict, one that's not fought here on Earth, but up in space. Our Tom Costello takes us inside the classified Space Force Satellite Command Center for a first-ever look at the future of defense.
Plus, helping artists prepare for their moments in the spotlight. We're going to chat with the performance coach who's helped turn musicians like Lil Nas X into worldwide celebrities. Next.
With tension rising between the U.S., Russia, and China, NBC News was given exclusive access to America's Space Force Command Center, where military satellites are being carefully monitored. NBC News correspondent Tom Costello has the story.
Hey there, guys. Yeah, this is no joking matter when Vladimir Putin has threatened using nuclear weapons. And just as Russian and U.S. submarines shadow each other in the oceans, something similar is already playing out between our satellites in space. U.S. commanders say it's constant harassment and intimidation, and that is where America's 2-year-old Space Force comes in.
Pick up heading 270 detonator, Chinese Dragon.
Those 2 are engaging with the target.
In a dark simulator room at the Air Force Academy,
Following good hits, dead man.
America's next generation of fighter pilots is in the cockpit.
Ambush 1.
But these future officers have a choice to make. They can stick with a career as airmen or apply to become a guardian with the brand new Space Force.
So we talk about how the warfighter is impacted by the space environment,
where the focus shifts from fighter jets to satellites. Like it or not, the reality is the battlefield is changing from planet Earth to space. This is the view of the Asian Pacific Theater. And the threat matrix in space is very different. It's congested, it's contested, and it's competitive.
Line down.
Copy line.
Our cameras were the first ever allowed inside the classified Space Force Satellite Command Center, where Space Force Guardians monitor every military satellite in orbit, including the vital links to units in the field, to Air Force One, and the nuclear chain of command. While next door, the GPS Command Center watches over 37 satellites that provide free GPS coverage to the world.
How accurate is the U.S. system?
Within a 1.5 feet guaranteed.
A 1.5 feet?
Yes, sir.
Outside, under heavy guard, one of several mobile satellite command units never before photographed, ready to roll across the country should headquarters face imminent threat. The U.S. military says Russia and China are already regularly harassing, jamming, and probing U.S. commercial satellites that are critical to the U.S. economy.
Satellites come in all sizes, from a school bus to a dishwasher to a cooler to the size of a loaf of bread, providing everything from internet access to university experiments, GPS, and military communications.
Both Russia and China have already targeted and blown up their own satellites, creating massive orbiting debris fields.
I think they're trying to send a message that they could target somebody else's as well, and now we have to deal with the aftermath of those tests.
Space Force was created to avoid an actual shooting war in space or on the moon. General Sean Bratton.
How do you determine what is a hostile act in space?
We're working through that now. We don't have that history like we do in the other domains to build upon, and so as we're encountering these threatening activities for the first time, it's forcing us to really define these terms.
This is a major threat.
A new threat environment for new Guardians and Academy cadets who are already designing and launching their own satellites. After graduating, senior Courtney Kirkpatrick will head to MIT for her master's, then Space Force.
They're creating a new culture. Everything's going to be fast-moving, the digital force, as they call it. That was really attractive to me.
As for the future,
as the United States builds out a lunar presence of our own, do we need boots on the moon to protect those assets?
Well, I think that remains to be seen.
Yeah, Space Force is small, only 14,000 military personnel right now. And the culture is much more like Silicon Valley. Think Apple, not Army, where you've got officers with masters and PhDs working alongside people right out of high school who are very tech savvy. A more inclusive, collaborative environment at really every level. Guys, back to you.
All right, thanks, Tom. Fascinating look.
You've heard of a singing coach, dancing coach. What about a performance coach? It's someone who helps artists bring their most authentic selves to the stage.
It turns out most of us can learn a thing or two from the practice, like how to communicate effectively and feel comfortable in our own skin. So we tagged along with one performance coach in Los Angeles to see how she helps her clients prepare for their big moments.
Get in the room.
Get in the room.
Then change the room. My job is never to give anyone something they don't already possess.
Then change the room.
KJ Rose is a performance coach who helps artists prepare for the stage.
My job is to agitate and irritate areas that may have just been lying dormant. But if I can get it out of you, that means you already had it.
Keep going.
She's pretty good at it with an impressive list of clients, including Lil Nas X.
Tell me you love me.
Today, she's working with actress and singer Kayla Brianna, who just dropped a new single.
I'm really excited because I wrote this song and I've never performed it, like I said, but I really want to make sure I can make sure everyone feels what I'm saying.
Oh, body roll.
Yeah.
You forget that these people have never heard the words before, and it is your responsibility to project that point of view so people feel included and a part of your story.
Too long ago.
We're closing off here, right? But I want you to perform like you're going to Rosie's. In the back of the room. People want to feel like you are speaking to them, not singing at them.
I know you feel it too.
What?
The way you touch me.
What? Kayla Brianna is special in that she does it all, right? So she's an actress, she is a businesswoman, and she's also this performing artist. And when you tap into all three, they all require something different, but they each require belief.
With all the acting roles, you're playing as they'll tell you exactly what they want, like witty, smart, just graduated college but doesn't want to be under her parents' roof. It's very all so specific. Songwriting is like, okay, how can I let people know who I am without giving them the description exactly of who I am?
That's not just a struggle for artists. KJ says performance is much more than being on a stage. That in fact, all of us are performing in some aspect every day.
Your external expression is really a reflection of what you think internally.
Vulnerability is the key. It allows us to take our power back. Nobody has access the way they do. Nobody can trigger us or activate us in a way that we don't have control of. What are you thinking before this song starts?
Thinking of what other people are thinking in that moment. I was. KJ brought a lot out of me. She helped remind me of my power, of why I'm supposed to be there, and that I am enough. I cannot wait to get out there and to really perform with intention, really have people understanding why I'm singing, what I'm singing, and really have them feel it.
We're so excited to welcome KJ Rose back to the show, along with Kayla Brianna, the singer you just saw in that piece. Thank you both for joining us. Kayla, we're going to start with you. We saw you preparing for a show in Los Angeles, so tell us how it went. And no pressure, never mind that KJ's listening right now, but did KJ's tips help you at all?
No one made a sold-out show, and I'm just helping me feel comfortable up there. So, yeah, it went really, really well.
Oh, that's great to hear. And Kayla, I mean, I think all of us look at what you do and we're like, oh, I can imagine how nerve-wracking that would be, whether it's live or whether it's on a TV show where you're acting. Tell us about what's tough for you. What are some of the challenges that you run into? And then how has working with KJ helped that? How does performance coaching bring the best out?
Yeah, I feel like those pre-show jitters, that anxiety that you have before a show is so nerve-wracking. KJ helps me remind myself that I'm supposed to be own the room and that I'm enough. And that's half the battle.
So KJ, we saw a little bit of your coaching process there. What didn't we see from that session? What else do you do to help people feel more comfortable on stage? Lessons that can help people even beyond that?
Well, first, it's about being present. Most of the work is reminding people of the force that they are, the force that expands all of the space that you have on stage. When you walk into a room, it's how do you show up? And it's the reconciliation of that long before you walk into the room. It's the work that you do to say that I belong here. I'm not asking permission to be here. And it's that internal resolve that must take place before you can show up fully for anyone else.
Absolutely. So, KJ, I mean, help us bring this into our everyday lives. People hear performance coaching and think it's for somebody stepping onto a stage, but really, I mean, we can all learn from it, whether you're going to your office every day, working from home even. What are your top tips for people on how to put your best foot forward, on how to make sure we're making sure that other people have that sort of the space we're taking up?
Yes. Well, number one, we're all artists. So wherever you occupy the most space, that is your stage. You guys, there's an art to what you do. If not, then everybody would be doing it. So it's first resolving that, like I belong in this room, I am an artist, and I have a gift. Once you understand that your gift is necessary, then you walk with a different posture, right? You don't ask to be in the room. There is a certain you feel emboldened. So I would say it's what we can see from the physical aspect of things. It is your eye contact. It is not feeling like you have to retreat in a room or that you're smaller. It is standing tall. It is making sure that you shake someone's hand, knowing that you belong there. It is taking up space. It is, but in your own way. It doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be something that does not represent who you are, but it's fully just being yourself and telling your story in such an explicit way that it can't be hijacked. Right? So nobody really wants to do the heavy lifting. You know, they want to know that you figured out who you are and what your purpose is. And I think if nothing else, the work that I did with Kayla Brianna was helping her understand that her work and her songs were merely a conversation. Right? And I want to make sure that every conversation you have is purposeful. Every time you move on the stage, it's not out of futility, but it's to move the narrative forward. So it's making sure that you never land anywhere by default, that you have a plan and that you activate that plan and execute that plan effectively. to include and engage people. So you don't have to be an outgoing person to do that, whether you're doing that at home, or whether you're doing it in the boardroom. It is showing up for yourself.
I love what you said about so that nobody else can kind of take over your story if you're effectively communicating it.
Exactly. I'm inspired.
Yeah.
Always when we have you on,
when
KJ.
You come. Yeah, exactly. Jinx.
Exciting to be back. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, KJ and Kelly, thank you both, and congrats on the great performance and the new single.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. We're excited.
That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.